Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Hormone Genius Podcast. Teresa and I are going to talk a little bit about our cycle and how we can eat according to our cycle. And throughout this season of episodes, we've been told several times that some of the favorites have been the episodes about nutrition, diet, losing weight, that kind of stuff. So we are going to kick this episode off by talking about keto. So we've heard about keto diets before, but like ketones. So Teresa, you're so good at talking about like the ketogenic diet and doing that. We talked about that a little earlier on in this season, but I just read this really cool book, Teresa, like a month ago, by Dr. Mindy Pelz, Fast Like a Girl. And there was something about it that made sense to me using this idea of fasting and kind of, pairing it with our cycle. And you and I both have had eating issues in our younger life. So I'm always very sensitive to this concept of diets, constricting what we eat. There's just a lot of emotional baggage that comes with that. And with this book, it gave me an understanding and almost a permission to try to fast in certain ways without me fearing that it's going to like kick me into some sort of control behavior that I can get around food. So, Teresa, I'm really excited about today's episode.
Yeah, I'm excited that you wanted to do it. I think this is a topic that a lot of people are going to want to listen to. It kind of, we just did one on insulin resistance and, it's still playing into a lot of the same concepts around that. And I do think, like you said, I mean, this is something we always have to have a lot of caveats and we have to tell people we're not telling you to do these things necessarily. But just like I said about the ketogenic diet, when you understand the actual physiological principles around why something may be beneficial to health, then it's more than just seeing something as a way to eat or a diet. It's actually imagining that the body has therapeutic tools, evolutionary wise. And this is, I love like the concept of thinking about evolution. And you hear me kind of bring those things up in our podcast episodes. Evolutionary wise, our bodies are meant to be able to restore, renew, and heal, but it needs proper information to do that. And fasting happens to be a really incredible evolutionary tool that our bodies were designed. In fact, we literally have a gene, you could say, for fasting, which allowed us to survive. And imagine this, everybody's got that gene in a sense, because all the people who didn't have the gene way back when, they died.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like just like an animal adapts to an environment, and the species will become stronger. Humans became stronger and adaptable to survive in conditions where food was scarce and not available, or food needed to be grown or shot or killed, or all those things. And we were able to adapt. And so we all have this gene, you could say, to be able to fast for periods of time.
It's so interesting because, when I think about our ancestors and long ago, I think, oh my gosh, how did not everybody die of starvation? But I only really think that because I think about how often I eat, but it is interesting to know that the body wasn't built to eat every 2 to 3 hours. I mean, we survived fine. And to think not only did they survive, like in my head, I'm imagining maybe last year, if I was to think about this, or a few years, oh, there's a family huddled in the corner of a hut, and they're cold and they're hungry and they're tired. But actually, now the way I'm thinking about it is, oh my word, they probably had more energy than we do, like in terms of how their body was using energy. The energy that we use is almost like, I don't want to say it's counterfeit energy. It's not counterfeit. It's just not as good. It's not
Intuitive,
as effective, clean,
almost like intuitive. Yeah.
yeah, it's like not as intuitive. So to now think about that, like, oh my word, our ancestors had energy, and
Mm-hmm.
probably maybe better energy at times, most times, because of this fasting gene and this ability to use ketones. And so Yeah,
So what I
let's
was thinking about, Jamie, this is
yeah.
totally kind of random, but
Oh, I
and
love
and
random
not
stuff.
as far back evolutionary wise as you are speaking about. But I was thinking about how like the show The Little House on the Prairie, Michael Landon,
Mhm.
that show basically teaches us like how to live in all hardships, whether it be like you live in a lodge that could burn down, or someone could be eaten by a bear, or you didn't have food, or what did you do if your body like got an infection and you didn't have antibiotics. I don't know. I was just thinking about, and I think about this because I let my kids watch it. That is a hard show. And if you want to learn lessons in life, go watch Little House on the Prairie with Charles and Carolyn and their kids. Man, that's a good show.
I need to, I don't, I,
Have
I
you ever
didn't,
been a Little House on the Prairie fan?
I mean, it was on sometimes growing up, but actually funny, my college roommate loved Little House on the Prairie. And so it's funny in college.
I know, Jamie, if you started watching it, you'd be obsessed.
I what?
Yes.
Oh my word.
Mhm.
Okay. You've talked me into it. I trust you, Teresa. I mean, you know me
Yeah.
by now.
And your daughter would
No.
like it too.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you. Is it on Netflix? I wonder. I'll have to figure that out.
I think it's on Prime.
Prime. Okay. Well, there you go,
Anyway,
listeners. If you want
yeah,
to watch a good show that'll teach you about life's lessons, that's so cool.
that is, yep, exactly it.
Yeah, yeah. But
All right.
yes, so in regards to that, like in regards to survival and all these things, let's remind our listeners what ketones are, ketosis, like what this is, just like high level. And then again, during this episode, we're going to walk through different types of fasting. And actually, just a side note, when you said, like in Little House on the Prairie days and people are sick and, or even, earlier on, Mindy Pelz in this book talks about how there are fasts for your immune system.
Mhm.
So that made sense to me because I think, gosh, when I don't feel well, I don't want to eat. But that's truly important. Like our body needs that break and it needs that fast. And I never had thought of that before because growing up, I'm sure your mom always would say, oh, eat up. You need the energy. You don't feel good. Eat up. You need the energy. And we need
Yeah, and
water.
that's
We need
true.
electrolytes. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't know if you've heard this phrase, starve a flu and feed a cold, starve a flu, feed a cold. So there's, just kind of a common kind of mantra or grandma thing that if you had a flu, where there would be stomach issues and possibly vomiting, you need to
Yeah.
starve that. But
Oh,
if you have a cold, the sniffles, and you just kind of don't feel well, you're supposed to like eat
vitamin C.
soup and kind of
Yeah.
feed yourself. But in a sense, that's not quite probably true. You could probably starve either of them
Mhm.
because, and this is true from the immune system standpoint, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about it, but like cancer, everything in the body feeds off of some sort of energy.
Right.
And most things feed easily off of a sugar energy, right? So, cancer cells feed off of a glucose energy. And so viruses can too. And so if we starve our body and put ourselves in a low glucose state, so this is to answer your question about what are
Yeah.
ketones at a high level, most of us sit in a sugar burning state because we have sugar available to our bodies. And when the body's blood sugar goes low enough, with this would happen after about 12 to 13, 14 hours, even overnight, if you don't eat, your body says, okay, sugar now is absent. Where should I get my fuel source from? And so it starts to make something called ketone bodies, which is just an alternative fuel source to the body, which our bodies easily use, and in some ways use even more readily and easily than glucose energy. And that's because it doesn't need insulin in order to be used in the cells. So we make ketone bodies. We make it, from a source of our fat cells, and so that's really great. But it also can come from other sources too. And that fuel source, fuels the brain. It fuels the heart particularly, but it fuels the entire system. So ketone bodies, in a sense, just an alternative source of energy for when our bodies is absent of any glucose for a prolonged period of time.
Yes, yes, yes. And there's a phrase that I don't know if we've talked about this phrase before, if this Mindy Pelz lady talked about, but metabolic switching.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the point. Okay, so this is maybe a well-known term, Teresa, I
I
guess.
don't think it is.
Okay, so yeah, it's like the point in which, we switch from, the sugar burning to the fat burning. And she talks about how like between 13 and 15 hours a day of no eating. And I think, the sound of that sounds, oh, that sounds startling. I'm scared. But in reality, that's not that big of a deal. if you think about it, that's like if you were to go to bed at 9, that just means you don't eat until 10 the next day, maybe around 10 or noon. To me personally, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. And Teresa, we talked about this in a few episodes back about like weight loss, like in our 40s and beyond. But something you said, I've never not thought it probably on the days following because I'm entering my 40s soon and we don't need as much fuel. We don't need as much fuel. We're not like actively having children, as much, and we don't need as much energy, although of course we can still be fertile. So anyway, just for you listeners, when we talk about fasting, there are different lengths of fast. Of course, we know about fasting because maybe you fast in, during Lent, or you're of a religion where there's fastings at some point during the year. There's a spiritual aspect as well to fasting that's quite beautiful. But even just for our health, there are different like levels of fasting.
Yeah, that's good. And I just want to make a clarification too. When we talk about fasting, we do not mean dry fasting. This means that people still drink and hydrate themselves. So water, obviously our body's made of 75% water, and water, we can survive without food, but it's harder to survive in a sense, or water is really important. So this is not dry fasting. This is still hydrated fasting. And fasting also can have some nuances in it. There's different ways that people fast. In fact, there's even fasting mimicking diets where it's not really true fasting, but you bring down the caloric amount so low that they call it a fasting mimicking diet. And that's actually been studied for similar health benefits of actually fasting itself. But we do not mean dry fasting. I remember I had a woman that was really kind of unhealthy when I saw her, and she had been fasting for a religious reason, but she thought that fasting meant no water as well. And so she was going, prolonged periods of time without eating and not drinking at all. And so when I told her, no, fasting really should be done with water, and that is okay, and obviously it's people's personal choice and that, but she was really, really dehydrated. So we mean you still stay very hydrated in this situation, of fasting.
Holy moly. Yeah, that's not good. And that's again another thing is, ladies, when you hear this, we're not saying starve thyself. We're not saying there are benefits where if you take a day or 2 or 3 of the month, and again, there's more to it that we're going to get into in this episode. There are health benefits. Doesn't mean that we have to fast all the time, that we're going to be, weak and tired. That's not at all what we
So
mean.
what are those health benefits, Jamie? Like, what
Yeah.
did you learn from Dr. Pelz about what the health benefits of fasting are?
Yes, there are many. So beyond just the like hormone regulating and metabolic regulating, which we're going to talk about that, it regenerates neurons damaged by toxins. So when we fast, it's like a cellular reboot, a neurological reboot. It also helps our mitochondria, it balances our gut, and of course, it helps with our hormones. So those are some benefits of fasting. Also, I want to talk about how I just thought this is so cool. All right. So, we think about calories in, calories out, as a health promotion, exercise science woman in college. That's always what we learned about. Like calories in has to equal calories out. But what they're doing more research on and understanding, it's not so much about the amount of calories, it's when you eat the calories, which in a way is pretty empowering. So, in 2018, they did a study in a Journal of Nutrition, Health, and Aging, and they found that obese individuals experienced better metabolic health just by reducing their eating window to 10 hours in the day. Okay. So the participants ate whatever they wanted. Okay. So it seems a little weird, but truly they ate whatever they wanted. It was during an 8-hour window, not a 10-hour window. And they had dramatic results. But then there was another study. So that alone tells us, wow, that's crazy. They could eat garbage, although we're not saying to eat garbage. And they noticed significant results in their metabolic health. In a 2022 study, this was one of my favorites, and it's the Cell Metabolism Journal. They found that people who ate during a 10-hour period experienced greater metabolic effects than those who ate the same foods during a 14-hour window of eating. So we're saying you could eat the same amount of foods that steak, those potatoes, the biscuits, the pie in a 10-hour eating window and eat the same foods, let's just say comparatively, in a 14-hour window, and the benefit is better if there's a less long window. Isn't that crazy?
Well, and let's like talk about why that would happen, because this has to do
Yeah.
with the hormones more,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a truth about calories in, calories out. Like if you
Oh,
just,
totally.
again, reduce the amount of calories, you may lose weight. And a lot of times people are reducing this all to weight loss, which that may be your goal. But the reality is, when we're looking at it more from an endocrine standpoint and what it's doing to the body, if we just don't eat in longer periods of time, what happens is, and it goes back to the ketones, is that there is a renewal process happening in the body that just wouldn't happen if you just reduced calories. So if you reduce insulin enough, the body will again ignite these ketones, which are anti-inflammatory themselves. They actually reduce inflammatory chemicals, and they seek out to kind of heal the cell. So when you say it increases mitochondrial health, it actually even restores intestinal permeability. So it allows the microbiome to generate. And, over a period of time, when people would do this, they would see that it reduces blood sugar overall. It would, allow the cholesterol profile to be better. And so from a health standpoint, there's benefits that we just wouldn't see necessarily. You might see weight loss with caloric restriction, but you wouldn't get as much of this kind of almost natural healing process that occurs when you fast.
I love that. I love it because it doesn't seem restrictive to me. It just seems smart. And the restrictive things are what like trigger me and make me nervous for myself and others, especially those of us who have high control and want to do everything right all the time. And again, that's just it. Know thyself. Know thyself. If you know that you've had experiences of again, eating disorders or high control over your caloric intake, just also take this with a grain of salt. But truly, there's so much healing, and the
Or have a
majority of people
professional help you.
have a
Don't do it
professional.
alone. Have a medical
Yeah.
professional help you. And I would say, and this goes to, there's other reasons you wouldn't want to fast for long periods of time. You wouldn't fast if you were pregnant.
Right.
We would not advise that, because pregnancy is such a high need of nutrition because you're growing another person. So that's not your time to be fasting. And it also, even breastfeeding, although it's a little different and you might be able to intermittently fast, you're not going to do prolonged breastfeeding. And this is kind of interesting. And this is another aspect of fasting we have to think about. And I know Dr. Pelz talks about this at a point where you go beyond 24 hours of fasting. And especially when we get to like longer fasts, the body starts to break down fat, right? Really quite well. But what's in fat cells, Jamie?
Estrogen.
Estrogen
Toxins.
and toxins, right? So if someone has a really high toxic burden, they would be releasing toxins into the system. And like if you have good, system movement, lymphatic drainage, and you're pooping every day and all that stuff, you might be able to eliminate that. But what we wouldn't want that to go into would be breast milk.
Yeah.
Right. So something
Yeah. So
kind of
true.
very interesting to think about, like, maybe not prolonged fasting and breastfeeding, maybe just, some short feeding windows or, that you would do. But that's, I find kind of interesting, and something we really need to think about is, what is our toxic burden?
That's such a good point. And like, yeah, are we pooping every day? And if we are doing these fasts and we're not pooping every day, again, you should be working with some like a trained doctor, a dietitian, but that would be something to think about for sure. So Teresa, let's kind of start bringing this now into our cycle. And so what I think we could do, of course, our listeners have probably been listening to us for a while now, but if you're new and you're just jumping on, and this is maybe the third or fourth episode or first even, I'm just going to do a quick overview of the cycle. So I'm going to break this down into estrogen and progesterone, but those are going to be the two main hormones I talk about. So day one of our cycle is day one of our period. Our period are the number of days we bleed after not having gotten pregnant from the cycle before. So often it's like moderate, heavy, and it's a little, 5 to 7-ish days, a little less maybe for some. And then after you bleed, so your hormones are very low during your period, very low, but then they start amping up as you progress throughout your cycle, specifically estrogen in this case, in this sort of analogy I'm going to give you. So we're going to amp up the estrogen. And as we're amping up the estrogen, our body, estrogen is very energetic. So if estrogen was a girl, like a person, she'd be like the socialite, and she'd be the gal that wore a lot of makeup, and she likes going out in the town. But what's interesting is that when estrogen is high and we're social and our body wants to be outward, we don't necessarily crave a lot of food, which is interesting. And next time you have your period and you're moving into your estrogen genius phase, which again is the time in which you're amping up that estrogen, you're noticing cervical mucus as a sign of that, you're likely less hungry. You might need to remind yourself to eat, which is interesting because then after you ovulate, progesterone is the dominant hormone, and progestate, like we've talked before, progestation, you need calories. You need calories for a potential baby, but your progesterone also needs calories, actually. So what I like about Mindy's book is she talks about how we can do ketobiotic kind of fasting and how estrogen likes to fast, which is interesting because it's more natural to us to fast, actually, when estrogen is high. And then with progesterone likes to feast. And we don't want to decrease foods as much. We don't want to fast as much during, after ovulation, during the high progesterone time, because if we do, it can cause our body to create more cortisol, which is a stress hormone. And if cortisol is high, progesterone is likely low. And so we don't want to stress out our body. That's another reason why I like Mindy's approach is she's taking into account how every day a woman is hormonally different. And if we want to fast, fasting is going to look different from the beginning of the cycle as compared to the very end of our cycle. So again, hormone feasting is after ovulation, hormone fasting is before. And I just thought that was cool.
Yeah, it makes me think about the evolution apart again and men being different than women and how men make this hormone testosterone every day, right? And so men actually have a greater capability for fasting. And it makes me think about how like men naturally desire to procreate every day, like their libidos, right, are really high every day, different than women. And men actually like could go out and spend days, probably they would leave their huts for a month and go to kill food, right? So their body just naturally with that high testosterone gave them the ability to be able to fast and fast well and fast easily. Women again are cyclic, so we are not the same, so we can't fast like a man. So we have to fast differently because we have these cyclic hormones. And what's cool about what you say about the estrogen being really high, right, when we can procreate, right? And what also goes up when we can procreate?
Or sex drive.
Testosterone.
Oh, and testosterone, yes.
We make the most testosterone we'll make in a cycle when our estrogen is also the highest. And also that gives us this desire. So it just goes back to the like, everything is kind of these survival principles. Like you need water, you need food, you need to procreate, you need to breathe, right? You know, just like these very basic principles. And our bodies are kind of built around those. And we have to work with our bodies evolutionary wise. And so with the cycle, again, with women, and I think this would be so cool to talk about from an athlete's perspective, Jamie, because, you know, if you're training and you're trying to get your muscles built the best that you can, you may want to think about, should I be tracking my cycle and should I be kind of fueling my body based on where my estrogen and progesterone levels kind of are, at least basically?
Totally. Oh my gosh, I never had thought really about, yes, how testosterone will assist in that man's ability to thrive for days and days without food, and how that's true. If we do think about testosterone in our highest points when estrogen's high, that makes so much sense. That'll be like an appetite suppressant in a way. And that's what I like about it, is because it is. And so it's a twofer, it can benefit our health, but it's not like we're going to try to fight the tide. It might be hard at times, but again, if we're thinking about our eating window, and there are different lengths of eating window times, maybe the eating window is 8 days, 10 days, maybe you fast for a day, whatever that case is, but it doesn't have to be this terrible, terrible hard thing. I want to talk too about like what kinds of foods will help to naturally build up estrogen versus progesterone. Of course, healthy eating is important no matter what. So I want to talk about that. Are we good to shift over to that, Teresa?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cool. So again, high level, it's worth a reminder. I have to remind myself of this every day that I want to buy a Butterfinger at the gas station because I love Butterfinger.
Is that your favorite candy bar?
I love
That
Butterfinger.
is so funny because don't you see like kids at Halloween, all they want to do is get rid of 2 candy bars. What are the 2 candy bars?
Do they want to get rid of Butterfinger?
Yes,
They do?
Butterfingers. It's probably not as high as the Almond Joy, right? What kid does not want to give their parent every Almond Joy in their Halloween bag? But I would say Butterfingers are kind of up there because
Really?
I don't know. I don't think, and it gets stuck in your teeth.
It does. I know. It's like a second dessert, basically. I'm just joking. Terrible for you.
I'm a Reese's peanut butter cup and a Snickers girl. Those are my
I
two.
like those too. I like those. I like almond joy. Oh, man, I'm such like a little
Mm-hmm.
who knows. Watch, like we're gonna get so much like Halloween candy this upcoming year from listeners Butterfingers. If you guys want to send me some, please do. Anyhow, yes, I love Butterfingers. So anytime I want a Butterfinger, I think to myself, where am I at my cycle and why do I want that? Because if again our natural inclination is not to be super hungry with estrogen, but I might be, there might be some other maybe emotional thing that I'm hungry for. So there's so much to our emotion and our externals that also affect why we want to eat. Just a little caveat. Okay. So eating healthy is important. So we can get really like nitpicky into this, and that is not our intention at all. When we want to think about eating well, first things first, the less ingredients, we hear this all the time, the less ingredients, the better. Does an apple come with an ingredients label? No, because it is what it is. You see it. It's called an apple. There's one ingredient. It's called apple. So as you go to the store, whatever you buy, I mean, this has been a challenge with myself, less than 5 ingredients. So that's just one good first step. And maybe that's one of the first steps you make before getting all into all of it, because either we try everything and then we fail and we don't want to start again. Okay, so shop the perimeter, reduce the like processed foods, the vegetable oils like canola oil, vegetable oil, corn syrup, all of that. Okay, so let's just assume our listeners, Teresa, at this point, they kind of know that part. Okay, so and we're ready to kind of move on to the next level. All right, so estrogen building foods. I'm going to list some out. You guys can write it down. And my challenge to you is to go to the store this week, whenever you go to the store, and buy one of these to start incorporating during your estrogen genius phase. So again, that's the around after period until ovulation. Get one of these and maybe eat a handful or whatever every day or every other day. Okay. Good source of fat. So seeds, nuts. Brazil nuts, we know is great for thyroid. I personally love the Brazil nut recommendation, Teresa, that you made like season 1. I think everybody that has listened to that episode probably has bought Brazil nuts since they learned about that and how it helps our thyroid. Almonds, cashews, peanuts, walnuts, pumpkin seeds. Those are all great things. So choose one from that list if you want a challenge for yourself. Okay. Push pause, rewind, and write it down. Secondly, legumes. So peas, chickpeas, lentils, kidney beans, make a good soup. Okay, so legumes like estrogen, fruits and veggies, cabbage, spinach, garlic, broccoli, cauliflower, strawberries, blueberries. Again, just the healthy foods. But if you want specifics, again, feel free to grab 1 or 2 of those and add it to the estrogen genius phase. So I'm going to move into that to progesterone, and then we'll discuss it, Teresa. And maybe you and I can kind of come up with something that we want to try to incorporate more of, like on our call. I think that'd be kind of fun. Okay, so estrogen, progesterone. So again, that's after ovulation, rooted vegetables. So we just learned with estrogen, we can keep things pretty light. I mean, obviously I talked about the healthy fats, and we want, of course, like healthy proteins, but we're not going to be as hungry, and we might be deciding, if you're doing this, to fast a little longer. So when you eat, you'll eat like the healthy fats and the healthy proteins, but you can fast for a length of time. But after ovulation is where you're going to need more calories, more carbs, because your progesterone needs glucose and you don't want to stress out your progesterone. Okay, so some healthy rooted vegetables, potatoes. You could do white potatoes, you could do red potatoes, you could do sweet potatoes, beets, yams, pumpkin squash. So rooted vegetables are great. Your progesterone loves that. cruciferous vegetables like Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, broccoli. Something else about those is that they have DIM. And Teresa, I don't know what DIM, like DIM, I don't know what the long word of DIM. I know you could take it as a supplement, but DIM helps to eliminate excess estrogen in the body. So you can buy like a supplement called DIM, and it's just basically like, the Brussels sprout, broccoli, cauliflower combo, whatever that element is, DIM to help to remove excess estrogen. So you could just include it in your diet, and hopefully your period is a little less heavy and painful because that also helps. Citrus fruits and seeds. So citrus fruits, oranges, lemons, grapefruits. Vitamin C is essential for production of progesterone. And because if we're going to get sick, this is one of my favorite facts. If we're going to get sick, it's going to be after we ovulate. That's another cool thing I like about this progesterone time is the vitamin C and the citrus fruits are helpful not only for our immune system, but for the production of progesterone. I'm going to stop there just because I've been talking for a while. Are there any of those foods? I mean, there's more we can talk about. And as a matter of fact, I have a whole other list. But are there things there, Teresa, where you have a hard time eating them or you love to include that in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, I mean, I struggle honestly getting in a lot of foods just because I think my work life is hard to kind of get those things in. I mean, I actually fast always through breakfast, and I do drink my coffee. And again, this gets into the nuance of like what's a true fast because I will put fat in my coffee. Now, if I'm doing a better job of really paying attention, I would only put fat, and that would mean MCT oil or just whipping cream. But once you start adding like anything else in your coffee, like, that has any carbohydrates, you could still be in a state of ketosis. A lot of people who are metabolically able to switch, but you're not really in a true fast at that point and don't necessarily get the benefits of that renewal recycling. And, when we get to autophagy, which we haven't talked about yet, but yeah, I mean, I need to, and I'm a gardener. I like to have some things grown in a garden vegetable wise every year. So I love putting squash and zucchini in there just because they're freaking easy to grow. And I try to grow the easiest things so I don't get disappointed in my garden, which is like we could do a whole podcast on gardening, but so I always put zucchini and squash because they're easy, and I put sweet peas and beans in there, and the kids like to grow those. So I get excited about being able to incorporate those in the diet. And I love just putting squash and zucchini just in a little bit of like olive oil with some salt on it. And it's so good, just kind of like not just kind of like, warming that up. But that's what I want to. And then I would focus on the nuts too myself, because I actually, I love cashews. Peanuts are a little hard for some people. Peanuts really bother my stomach. So just kind of listen to your body about which nuts like feel better in your gut. I do think some people can have some sensitivities to nuts. So just, when you eat something, just because it's like said to be healthy, it may still not be healthy for you. And this is true of everything. Listen to your body. But I love cashews, but those are higher in fat. So you have in calories. So you have to be a little bit more careful with those, but I need to do the Brazil nuts too. So that's going to be my homework is I've got to get the Brazil nuts.
Brazil nuts. Okay, that's good. That's good. My goal, I have it on a piece of paper, and like it's funny because it's just to remind me. And does it work? No. I mean, I maybe if I put it up every Sunday and took it down for a day, but it's there, and then I always forget. A smoothie. I just want to make a freaking smoothie. Jamie, just do it. I mean, sometimes I'm really good, sometimes I forget. But for me, when I get a smoothie that is not like ladled with just the berries and the sugary stuff, that is what my goal is. So even like a friend of mine told me this. She buys frozen cauliflower and just puts the frozen cauliflower in the thing. Or she buys like, frozen vegetables like peas and carrots and puts it in her smoothie, but then puts still the berries so you don't taste it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, so smart.
Back in the day, Jamie, I generally don't like smoothies. I don't like being cold. I feel like so I have a hard time with, but back in the day, and this was when I was having my babies, I would make the greatest smoothie ever. And I would put Dannon coffee yogurt with like a half a banana with chocolate protein powder, ice, and that yogurt, that coffee yogurt. And it would just be like this mocha and peanut butter. Did I say peanut butter?
Yeah, you said peanut butter.
In there. Oh my gosh. I could have drank that all day. And I don't even know if Dannon makes coffee yogurt. It was like in this I remember when they stopped making it. So I'm sure some other brand makes it now, but the
Oh,
coffee flavored yogurt in there with a banana, peanut butter, chocolate protein powder. Holy mackerel. I love that.
oh my word. That sounds
Yeah.
amazing.
Maybe
Okay.
not as healthy as like all the things we're talking about, but
Right. But still, I mean, that's good. I mean, that's a yummy. I didn't realize there was coffee yogurt.
mm.
But
I feel
anyway,
like
yes.
Jamie, do you think we should give some context for like the times of fasting, just
Yeah.
so people, and again, I think everybody needs to talk to their doctor about whether this is right for them. But, there is this reality of like, when you say fast, what do you mean in terms of the amount of time? And like you said, Jamie, fasting, the thought of it can be kind of overwhelming or scary for people. So what do you know about just like the times and what benefit, certain times of fasting have for people's,
Mhm.
kind of health?
Yeah. Something that I really liked about what Mindy has done, and again, I'm like a super fan of Mindy, and I just started learning about her. So I definitely am not a pro, but these are the things I'm taking back or home. Like in terms of the time, I think what you're asking, and if not, just clarify with me. But like there's autophagy fasting. So fasting again is when cells start to heal themselves, and that's what starts happening after 17 hours. So again, like a typical fast, 13 to 15 hours, you can just kind of plan on it, unless again, you're progesterone, you're stressed, and you might need to eat a little more, listen to your body, like Teresa said. And then also there's like a gut reset. So I like what you talked about too with fasting, and then also letting it heal your gut lining, because so many people who struggle with autoimmune conditions, thyroid issues, rheumatoid arthritis, a lot of it's because of a leaky gut, of that inflammatory response. So if we can heal the gut, so she says that about 24 hours will give us a gut reset. So that's just another cool thing too. I mean, it's not like you had to fast for 24 hours every day, one day a week. It's just maybe you choose one of the 24-hour fasts to start that reset. To me, that doesn't seem that overwhelming, especially if medication, not to say you shouldn't take medication, you should, but if there's like a chronic condition you've just been diagnosed with, give it a try. Talk to your doctor, see what you can do. Okay, the other one is fat burner. So again, I'm just listing what she's written. 36 hours is fat burner. Dopamine reset is 48 hours, which I thought was interesting. So when we think about dopamine, Teresa, let's talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to say one more, and then I want to go back to dopamine. The immune system reset. So let's say you struggled with a virus from a few years back, starts with a C, and you were struggling with your immune system, which I can say I personally, Teresa's gotten a number of messages from me being like, I don't feel good. I struggled so bad post COVID. I did. I couldn't get past. I was always so tired, get sick all the time. I cannot say that I've been sick the last 6 months personally. It seemed like always, and then now I just feel better, probably a little bit because of getting warmer. But anyway, 72 hours, an immune system reset. And again, that makes sense because when you're sick for a while, you're not eating, and then poof, you get better. So anyway, I want to talk about dopamine, but is there anything else there that you want to say?
No, that's good. Yeah. And I think, if you haven't ever done a 24-hour fast, don't push yourself necessarily. Take it slow. Try, again, when we talk about fasting for 13 to 15 hours, most of that's overnight. So that's
Right.
easy, right? So once you go into the daytime hours, maybe you're like, oh my gosh, I've never done 24 hours before. I'm a little nervous about it. Maybe put, again, a little bit of fat in your coffee, or allow yourself one small meal at the end of the day, like cheese or something, just or a few nuts. So in your mind, you're like, I'm not going to, this is a mind game, right? It takes a level of self-discipline, and so take it slow, listen to your body. If you don't feel well, go slower, talk to your doctor, all those things. But those are good. And once you can get trained, it's like muscle building, right? It's like you're training your body to be able to do this, just like people back in, days when they didn't have access to food. Their bodies were well trained to fast. And unfortunately, our society has not well trained us. In fact, we've been told to do the exact opposite, which is just eat small snacks all day, every day, which
Mhm.
snacking and eating every hour to 2 hours to 3 hours, frankly, is what gets us into trouble, right? Because that's what causes the insulin resistance. And it just has led to an epidemic. I mean, I'm talking 82% of our population is now either overweight or obese. Oh my Lord, it is so hard to even say that because it is a huge problem. So we have got to kind of figure this out. And if whether it be just caloric restriction or getting back to whole foods, there are so many principles that could kind of back this up a little bit, but fasting might be another tool that could allow us to kind of retrain our bodies to get some of this health back in the right place. Totally. But yeah,
dopamine. And again, if you're stressed out physically, personally, again, talk to your doctor. I personally wouldn't. Like, if you know that you're gonna get really lightheaded, or there've been times where I've tried to fast and I just don't feel right at all. And I'm thinking, okay, I can't do that right now. Don't feel shame. This isn't the only healthy way to do things, clearly. So don't, like, again, listen to your body for sure. Addison's disease, like adrenal fatigue, that kind of stuff, this isn't going to probably help you. You need to talk to a doctor. So again, you want to protect your adrenals first and foremost. So dopamine, this is kind of where I want to land on, Teresa. When we think about dopamine, you guys have heard dopamine before. Just a reminder, like anytime that it's like a pleasure hormone. So like anytime you eat chocolate or drink alcohol or you go shopping and you got an amazing deal, that's where I get a dopamine hit, when I find a good deal. Anytime where you're like, okay, that feels good and I want more of it, like kids playing their video games, that kind of stuff. Any sort of addiction, dopamine means I like how that feels, I want more of it. And often it doesn't have a ceiling. Well, it doesn't. So it wants more and more and more, and it can become numbing. So this dopamine reset, I've not tried it. I just read the book and I'm sharing it with you guys now, but it's interesting to me. I thought that's a really interesting, important thought, is a dopamine reset. Sometimes when we try to eat well, it's hard because I really just want that Butterfinger, or I really just want this thing that I know it's going to make me feel really, really good. But what would happen if, working with your doctor or a dietitian, let's just say you did a dopamine reset because you love alcohol so much, but it's not healthy for you. Wouldn't that be such a relief? Again, I have not tried this, but wouldn't it be so cool, Teresa, to do a dopamine reset and maybe just start fresh with some of the ties that we feel like we have that are unhealthy, specifically related to food?
And I think anybody and everybody can feel addicted to something on some level, or just feel like they need to kind of, check themselves on kind of whether it be shopping or a certain food or those habits. So yeah, I think that's totally true. And I love, like, if you want to go into the dopamine world, I listen to a really good podcast. It's Andrew Huberman, the Huberman podcast. He's a neuroscientist from Stanford, very well-known neuroscientist. The Huberman podcast got some super cool stuff on dopamine and how you can kind of like your activities, what you can do to help kind of reset your dopamine, but also kind of build the stores of dopamine, because you can actually deplete out your dopamine stores by doing too many pleasurable things and almost like combining too many pleasurable things at once. So it was fascinating stuff. I listened to it on the way home from a conference, but that gets into a whole nother thing. But yeah, I think that's true. I have noticed for myself, now I haven't done a lot of long fasting. I've done, closer to a 24-hour fast. I've never done a 48-hour or 36-hour fast. My husband has done that quite a bit in the past, but I have done the keto diet quite a bit. And I have known that since I have done the keto diet, and that started back in 2017, 18, I don't have the same kind of cravings and addictions for food that I did. And just now, I mean, I used to be like a massive breakfast, mostly carbohydrate driven breakfast person. And I never wake up thinking I should eat food. So my body just is now used to that. And I always feel better in my gut, especially in my brain, being able to hold off until, noon or farther sometimes. So, and I just find I don't, like, I can say no to sugar much easier. Whereas like when Halloween would come around, I would, wait for the kids to give me all their Snickers and the candy they didn't want. And I would stockpile it in my underwear drawer, which is right next to my bed. Right. And then every night, like 9 p.m., oh my gosh, I'm going to eat like one, right? I'm just going to eat one.
Right, right.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. Then like there's 10 wrappers on my dresser the next day. And I just find I just don't have that problem anymore. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I mean, everybody can get sugary, before
Mm-hmm.
their period, especially, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just interesting that I don't know. Yeah, when you take kind of control of your nutrition in a way like this, and fasting is one way to do it, keto is another way to do it, just kind of really focusing on portion control, getting back to whole foods, getting toxins out of your food, it is really quite amazing. There is nothing more kind of like powerful
Yeah.
to our bodies than what we put in it. And it totally makes sense, or what we don't put in it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So this is it's been really fun to kind of talk about. And so again, this book Jamie wrote this book Jamie read that she kind of got like super excited about. Just give people that title again. So if they
Yeah.
want to learn more and dive in and read that book, they can get it.
Yep. It's called Fast Like a Girl by Mindy Pelz. And when I've seen that book title floating around, but truly I didn't have a super strong interest in learning about fasting. It was only when I heard her be interviewed on some random podcast where it was more about the cycle and less about fasting. And then she brought it in, and I thought that makes sense to me. Really, it does. So if you love the cycle, you love learning about hormones, you're gonna really love that book.
Yeah.
Love
Yeah.
it.
Obviously, we are all about the cycle. Anybody who's talking about that and hormones and linking it to anything else with health, we are there.
We are there. We are there. Well, thank you, Teresa, for chatting with me today. And ladies, again, be sure to write a review for us if you love what we are producing. Be sure to check out Teresa's book. Visit us on Instagram, Hormone Genius. And thanks again for following us.